You wake up to complete silence. Not the usual sounds of morning. No axes splitting wood. No men's voices planning the day's work. No heavy boots on wooden floors. You step outside your longhouse and realize something extraordinary. Every single man in your village has vanished. The boats are gone. The weapons are missing. And suddenly, you're not just a Viking woman anymore. You're in charge of everything. Welcome to 9th century Norway, where for 6 months of every year, this wasn't a nightmare. It was reality. And you're about to discover that Viking women weren't just waiting at home. They were running an empire. The pre-dawn darkness of your longhouse is broken only by the dying embers of last night's fire. But this isn't an ordinary morning in 847 AD. Today, the longships depart for the summer raiding season, and with them, nearly every able-bodied man in your settlement of Nordfjord. You are Astrid Eriksdottir, wife of Bjorn the Bold, mother of 3 children, and, though the visiting traders from the south would never believe it, one of the most powerful people in this community. For the next 6 months, while the men seek silver and glory across the whale road, you'll be responsible for everything that keeps this settlement alive. The sounds of preparation have been building for hours. Heavy footsteps on wooden floors, the scrape of weapons being gathered, the low murmur of men making final arrangements. With their wives, your husband Bjorn sits on the edge of your shared bed, methodically checking his seeks, the long knife that never leaves his side. The barley fields will need harvesting in 3 weeks, he says without looking up from his blade. Olaf's son promised to help, but his arm still isn't right from the bear attack. You'll need to organize the thralls and the other women. You nod, though you've already been planning the harvest schedule for days. Bjorn is a fierce warrior and a respected leader, but the practical details of keeping people fed and housed, those have always fallen to you and the other women of the settlement. What about the iron trade with the Sami? You ask. Ketil promised to return with the autumn furs. Handle it as you see fit, Bjorn replies, standing to strap on his sword belt. Your judgment in these matters is better than mine. Always has been. It's a casual acknowledgement that would shock outsiders who think of Viking women as powerless servants. The reality is far more complex. In Norse society, while men hold official authority and lead in warfare, women wield enormous practical power over daily life, trade relationships, and even legal matters. Through the wooden walls, you can hear similar conversations happening in every household. Gunnar telling his wife Helga about the debt that the Danish traders still owes them. Eric reminding his wife Sigrid about the boundary dispute with the neighboring farm that will need resolution. Thorvald explaining to his wife Inga where he's hidden the extra silver in case the settlement faces unexpected expenses. These aren't instructions from masters to servants. They're consultations between partners who understand that successful Viking raids depend entirely on successful management of the home front. Your 3 children, Leif, age 12, Thora, age 9, and little Magnus, just 4, sleep peacefully in the loft above, unaware that their world is about to change dramatically. When they wake up, their father will be gone, and their mother will be the ultimate authority over their lives until the snow flies again. But you've been preparing for this your entire life. As dawn breaks over the fjord, revealing the dragon-headed longships waiting at the shore, Bjorn performs the ritual that officially transfers authority to you for the coming months. He places the iron keys to the longhouse in your hands. Not just symbolic keys, but practical tools that control access to the family's wealth, food, stores, and most valuable possessions. I name Astrid Eriksdottir as keeper of my house, guardian of my children, and speaker for my interests in all matters. He announces to the assembled household, the thralls, hired workers, and extended family members nod their acknowledgement. For the next 6 months, your word will be law in this domain. But the keys represent more than just household authority. In Viking society, Women are the primary custodians of wealth, the managers of trade relationships, and the keepers of social connections that extend far beyond individual families. The silver arm rings, amber beads, and imported goods that represent years of successful raiding are all stored in locked chests that only you can access. As you watch the men load their ships with weapons, provisions, and trade goods, you're also calculating the resources you'll need to maintain the settlement while they're gone. 43 people will remain under your authority, 15 women, 21 children of various ages, and 7 thralls captured in previous raids. The arithmetic of survival is complex. You need to ensure adequate food for the winter, maintain the buildings and equipment, manage the livestock, defend against potential threats, and continue the trade relationships that bring in iron, grain, and luxury goods that the settlement can't produce itself. Remember, Bjorn says quietly as he prepares to board his ship, "You speak with my voice in all matters. The other women will look to you for leadership, and the surrounding settlements will judge our family's strength by how well you manage in my absence." It's both a show of confidence and an enormous responsibility. Viking society is intensely hierarchical, but it's also practical. The settlements that thrive are those where women are empowered to make crucial decisions without waiting for male approval that might come too late or not at all. You watch as the other wives receive similar transfers of authority. Helga, Gunnar's wife, takes control of the largest trading operation in the settlement. Sigrid, Eric's wife, becomes responsible for the settlement's legal affairs. She's known for her knowledge of law and her skill in negotiating disputes. Inga, Thorvald's wife, takes charge of the livestock and agricultural operations that feed everyone. As the ships disappear beyond the headland, you and the other women stand on the shore for a moment, watching the last of the sails vanish into the morning mist. Then you turn back toward the settlement, keys jingling at your belt, ready to begin the most demanding 6 months of your year. Your first major test comes just 3 days after the men's departure. A messenger arrives from the settlement of Westfjord, 2 days' journey to the south, with news that raiders from Denmark have been spotted along the coast. Not a large force, perhaps 2 ships, but enough to threaten isolated settlements whose warriors are away. The messenger, a boy barely 15, stands nervously in your hall as you consider the implications. Danish raiders know exactly when the Norwegian longships depart for England and Ireland. They time their coastal attacks to target settlements when they're most vulnerable. How many fighting men does Westfjord have left? You ask. Maybe 8, and half of those are old or injured, the boy replies. Jarl Magnus asks if Nordfjord can spare any warriors. You almost laugh at the irony. Nordfjord has exactly 0 warriors available, unless you count the women, children, and thralls who remain. But this is precisely the kind of situation that separates successful settlements from those that get burned out. While their men are away seeking glory, tell Jarl Magnus that Nordfjord will provide assistance, you say, your mind already working through the logistics. We'll send what aid we can within 2 days. After the messenger leaves, you call together the other women for a council meeting. This is where the reality of Viking women's roles becomes clear. You're not just managing households. You're coordinating military defense. We can't send fighters, Helga states the obvious, but we can send other kinds of support. Weapons, suggests Sigrid. We have the reserve arms that the men left behind, and intelligence, adds Inga. Our thralls include 3 Danes. They might know something about raiding patterns. You nod, appreciating how quickly they've grasped the situation. Also food and medical supplies. If Westfjord is under siege, they'll need provisions. And if there's fighting, they'll need help treating the wounded. The plan that emerges is quintessentially Viking in its pragmatism. You'll send a small convoy with weapons, food, and medicine, led by your most trusted thralls, and accompanied by 3 of the older boys, who can serve as messengers. More importantly, You'll establish a communication network with the other settlements so that information about Danish movements can be shared quickly. What about our own defenses? Ask Sigrid. This is the question you've been dreading. Nordfjord's location in a deep fjord provides some protection from seaborne attack. But the settlement is still vulnerable if raiders decide to make the effort. You have weapons. Every household. Keep spears, axes, and shields for precisely this situation. You have people who know how to use them. Viking women train with weapons from childhood. But you don't have the numbers or experience to fight off a determined attack. We prepare. For siege, you decide. If raiders come, we retreat to the longhouse and try to hold out until help arrives. But our best defense is making sure they don't see us as a worthwhile target. It's a sobering conversation, but not a panicked one. These women have spent their entire lives preparing for exactly this scenario. The summer raiding season has always meant that women must be ready to defend their homes, manage crises, and make life or death decisions without male supervision. 2 weeks into the men's absence, you're deep into the complex economics of running a Viking settlement. The numbers are daunting. 43 people to feed for 6 months, with limited resources and no guarantee that trade relationships will continue smoothly while the primary traders are away. Your morning begins before dawn in the storehouse, counting barley, dried fish, and preserved meat while calculating consumption rates. The harvest won't come for another month, and even if it's successful, you'll need to ensure enough food for winter storage. Every meal distributed now affects survival chances later. We're eating too much meat, reports Helga, who's been tracking food distribution. At current rates, we'll run short by midsummer. It's a problem you anticipated, with the men gone. Hunting is severely limited. The settlement's remaining population includes only 2 boys old enough to handle bows effectively, and both are needed for other duties. You'll need to adjust the diet, increase fish consumption, and possibly trade for additional grain. What about the Sami traders? Ask Sigrid. They're supposed to arrive next week with furs and iron. The Sami trade relationship is crucial but delicate. The nomadic reindeer herders from the north provide essential iron ore and finished tools in exchange for grain, amber, and silver, but they're accustomed to negotiating with men. And it's unclear how they'll respond to dealing exclusively with women. I'll handle the Sami. You decide. Torkel the trader spoke highly of their leader, Nalus. If I offer good terms and show respect for their customs, they should be willing to continue the relationship. But trade negotiations are just one aspect of the settlement's economic challenges. You're also responsible for maintaining the productive activities that generate wealth. Sheep herding, textile production, metalworking, and the crafting of goods that can be traded for necessities. The sheep require daily attention, and with fewer people available, you've had to reorganize the work entirely. The older children now spend most of their time as shepherds, while the women focus on textile production, spinning wool into thread, weaving cloth, and creating the high-quality garments that Norse traders prize throughout Europe. Your own specialty is tablet weaving, the complex technique used to create the decorative bands that trim the finest clothing. It's skilled work that takes years to master. And your pieces command premium prices from merchants who sell them as far away as Constantinople. In Bjorn's absence, this craft becomes a crucial source of income. The Irish trader is expected next month. Inga reminds you during an evening planning session. He'll want those tablet-woven borders for the monastery trade. The Irish connection is particularly valuable. Christian monasteries pay excellent prices for high-quality textiles, especially pieces with intricate patterns that demonstrate exceptional skill. The irony isn't lost on you. While your husband raids Christian lands for silver, you're creating beautiful goods that Christians eagerly purchase. 3 weeks after the men's departure, you face your first major legal challenge. A dispute has erupted between 2 thrall families over the ownership of a piglet. And it's escalated to the point where violence seems imminent in Norse society. Even slaves have legal rights, and their disputes require formal resolution. The case seems simple on the surface. Orm the Dane claims that his family's sow gave birth to the piglet. Ketil the Saxon argues that his family has been feeding the sow for 2 months, and therefore owns the offspring. Both men are thralls captured in previous raids, but their families have been integrated into the settlement's daily life. What complicates? The situation is that this isn't really about a pig. It's about status, respect, and the complex social dynamics that govern life in a multi-ethnic settlement where Danes, Saxons, Frisians, and Norse must coexist under Viking authority. In my land, Orm states during the hearing you've convened, livestock offspring belongs to whoever owns the mother. In my land, Ketil responds, feeding an animal for months gives you ownership rights. You listen carefully, not just to their words, but to the undercurrents of tension in their voices. Both men are testing your authority, trying to determine whether a woman can render judgments that will be respected by the settlement's diverse population. Norse law is complex on these matters, with different rules for different types of property and different categories of people. But more importantly, your decisions will establish precedents for how conflicts are resolved in your husband's absence. The sow belongs to this household, you state, establishing the basic framework. Therefore, any offspring is initially the property of this household. However, Ketil's family has indeed provided extensive care for the animal. You pause, considering the implications of your next words. I award the piglet to Ketil's family in recognition of their investment in caring for the sow. However, Orm's family will receive first choice of piglets from the next litter, acknowledging their claim based on parentage. It's a compromise that neither party loves, but both can accept. More importantly, it demonstrates that you understand the delicate balance required to maintain order in a settlement where different cultural traditions must coexist. The other women nod approvingly. Helga, who has experience with legal matters, later tells you privately that your solution was wise. You showed respect for both traditions while maintaining household authority. That's exactly what Buorm would have done. But legal authority extends beyond resolving thrall disputes. As the summer progresses, you'll need to negotiate boundary disputes with neighboring settlements, mediate conflicts between families, and make decisions about resource allocation that could affect the settlement's survival. The arrival of the Sami trading party in early summer tests your diplomatic skills and challenges Norse cultural assumptions about women in business. Niels and his people approach the settlement with the cautiousness of those who've learned that dealing with Vikings requires constant vigilance. The Sami are nomadic reindeer herders who follow ancient migration routes through the northern wilderness. They're skilled metal workers who smelt iron from bog ore and craft tools that are highly prized throughout Scandinavia. Their arrival represents both economic opportunity and cultural complexity. Where are your men? Nail is asked directly when you greet the trading party at the settlement's edge. It's not meant as an insult. He's simply trying to understand the social dynamics he'll be dealing with. The men sail the whale road seeking silver and glory. You reply, using the traditional phrase, I speak for this household and settlement in all matters of trade. Niels exchanges glances with his companions, clearly uncertain about the protocol for negotiating with women. Among the Sami, trading is traditionally a male activity. Though women hold considerable authority in other spheres of life, you have decision-making power. He asks carefully. I hold the keys to the storehouse and the silver, you respond, showing him the iron keys at your belt. I can negotiate terms and honor agreements. The next few hours involve careful cultural navigation as both sides work to establish trust and mutual respect. You demonstrate your knowledge of iron quality, discuss market conditions in southern settlements, and show appreciation for Sami craftsmanship. Gradually, Niels relaxes into what becomes a productive business relationship. The goods exchange is substantial. You trade grain, amber beads, and silver arm rings for iron tools, reindeer hide, and finished spear points. But more importantly, you establish your credibility as a trader who understands value and honors agreements. Your knowledge of metals is impressive, Nihilus admits as the negotiations conclude. Many warriors cannot tell good iron from bad. Viking women learn to evaluate everything that enters our households. You reply, our family's survival depends on making wise choices about tools, weapons, and trade goods. The successful conclusion of the Sami trade establishes an important precedent. Word will spread through the trading networks that Nordfjord remains a reliable partner even when the male warriors are absent. This reputation for consistency and competence is crucial for maintaining the economic relationships that keep the settlement prosperous. As the Sami pack their remaining goods and prepare to continue their journey, Nihilus makes an offer that surprises you. If you ever need to send messages to the eastern settlements, my people travel those routes regularly. We would carry word. For trusted trading partners, it's a generous offer that recognizes you as an equal in the complex network of relationships that bind Scandinavian communities together. The Sami, as nomadic traders, serve as crucial communication links between distant settlements, and their willingness to include you in this network represents a significant diplomatic achievement. As summer reaches its peak, the most critical period of your temporary leadership begins. Harvest season, the barley, oats, and root vegetables that will sustain the settlement through winter must be gathered, processed, and stored efficiently. Any mistakes now could result in starvation before the men return. The work is backbreaking and time-sensitive. Barley must be cut at exactly the right moment. Too early, and the grain won't be fully developed. Too late in autumn storms could destroy the crop. With limited labor available, every person in the settlement, from the youngest children to the oldest thralls, must contribute to the effort. You rise each day before dawn to assess weather conditions, organize work crews, and coordinate the complex logistics of feeding 43 people while simultaneously gathering food for winter storage. The physical demands are enormous, but the mental pressure is even greater. Everyone's survival depends on your decisions. The barley in the north field is ready, reports Thora, your 9-year-old daughter, who's become an expert at evaluating grain ripeness. But the south field needs another few days. You nod, proud of how quickly your children have adapted to increased responsibilities. With their father gone, Leif has become your primary assistant in managing daily operations. While Thora helps coordinate the younger children's contributions to household work, the harvest work reveals the sophisticated organizational skills that Viking women develop over lifetimes of managing complex households. You've divided the settlement into work teams, each responsible for specific fields and tasks. The teams rotate between cutting grain, bundling sheaves, and transporting harvested crops to storage areas. Food preparation is equally complex. Fresh grain must be processed immediately. Some ground into flour for immediate use, some set aside for winter porridge, some reserved for brewing ale. The timing is crucial because grain processing requires specific weather conditions and access to equipment that must be shared among multiple households. We need to start the ale brewing within 3 days. Helga reminds you as you survey the growing piles of harvested barley. The yeast cultures won't stay active much longer. Ale production is both practical necessity and social responsibility. Beer provides safe drinking water during winter months when fresh sources may be contaminated. And it's essential for the feasts and ceremonies that maintain community cohesion. A settlement that can't provide adequate ale for its members faces serious morale problems, but brewing requires substantial quantities of grain, fuel for heating, and specialized knowledge that not everyone possesses. You must balance the immediate need for ale against the long-term requirement for food stores. all while ensuring that other essential work continues. 2 months into the raiding season, the Danish threat that seemed to pass by earlier in the summer returns with new urgency. A messenger arrives from 3 different settlements, all reporting sightings of unfamiliar ships along the coast. The pattern suggests a coordinated Danish effort to probe defenses while the Norwegian warriors are away. They're testing us, Sigurd observes during the emergency council meeting you've convened. Looking for settlements that seem vulnerable. The intelligence picture is fragmentary but concerning. Danish raiders have attacked 2 small settlements to the south, burning buildings and carrying off captives. They're avoiding direct confrontation with defended positions, preferring to strike quick blows against targets that can't fight back effectively. What about calling back some of our men? Suggests Inga. If we send a fast ship, you shake your head. By the time a messenger reached them and they returned, either the danger will have passed or it will have struck. We need to handle this ourselves. The decision to rely entirely on local resources reflects both practical necessity and strategic wisdom. Viking raiding parties are carefully planned expeditions that can't be easily recalled without disrupting complex logistics and potentially profitable opportunities. The settlements must be capable of defending themselves, or the entire raiding strategy falls apart. Your defensive preparations are methodical and comprehensive. All weapons are distributed and checked for readiness. Food supplies are moved to secure storage areas that could survive a siege. Evacuation routes are planned for getting children and elderly residents to safety if the settlement is overrun. But your most important preparation is coordinating with neighboring settlements to create a mutual defense network. Messenger routes are established so that warnings can be spread quickly. Signal fires are prepared on hilltops to communicate across long distances. Most importantly, agreements are reached for mutual assistance if any settlement comes under attack. If the Danes hit Westfjord again, we'll send what help we can. You promised during negotiations with other settlement leaders. But if they come for us, we'll need immediate support from everyone in the region. The agreements you negotiate establish important precedents for women's authority in military matters. The other settlements accept your word as binding, recognizing that successful defense requires coordinated action, regardless of who's providing leadership. As autumn approaches and the first frost appears on the grass, you face the most complex diplomatic challenge of your temporary rule. A delegation arrives from Denmark with an offer that could fundamentally alter your settlement's position in the region's power balance. The delegation is led by Håkon the Wise, a Danish jarl who claims to be seeking peaceful trade relationships with Norwegian settlements. He brings impressive gifts: silver arm rings, amber jewelry, and bolts of fine cloth that demonstrate his wealth and status. These are difficult times for all our peoples. Håkon explains during the formal reception you've arranged in the Longhouse. Warfare between Danes and Norwegians benefits no one except the English and Franks, who grow strong while we fight each other. His proposal is seductive in its simplicity. Danish and Norwegian settlements could establish regular trade relationships, share information about threats from other groups, and cooperate in defending against Saxon raiders from the south. In exchange for joining this alliance, Nordfjord would receive protection and preferential trading terms. The offer creates an impossible dilemma. As a woman exercising temporary authority, you lack the political standing to make decisions about military alliances that could commit your settlement to actions against Norwegian interests. But refusing to negotiate could be seen as hostile and might invite exactly the kind of Danish attack you've been working to prevent. This is a generous offer that deserves careful consideration. You respond diplomatically, but agreements of this scope require consultation with the settlement's warriors when they return from their current expedition. Håkon nods as if he expected this response. Of course, but while we wait for your men to return, perhaps we could begin with smaller arrangements. Trade agreements that don't require military commitments. The negotiation that follows tests every diplomatic skill you've developed over years of managing complex household relationships. You need to maintain friendly relations without making commitments, demonstrate strength without appearing hostile, and preserve your options while avoiding immediate threats. The compromise you eventually reach allows for limited trade in certain goods while explicitly avoiding any military or political commitments. Danish traders will be welcome at Nordfjord, but under the same terms offered to any peaceful merchants. Information about mutual threats will be shared, but without formal alliance obligations. You negotiate with wisdom, Hakan acknowledges. As the discussions conclude, your husband is fortunate to have such a capable partner managing his interests. It's intended as a compliment, but it also reveals the fundamental tension in your position. As a woman, your authority is always viewed as derivative of male power, even when you're exercising independent judgment and skill that many men lack. Throughout the summer and early autumn, alongside all your other responsibilities, you've maintained the crucial task of educating the settlement's children in the skills they'll need as adults. With their fathers absent, this becomes entirely a female responsibility, and it reveals aspects of Viking society that outside observers rarely understand. Your own children, Leif, Thora, and Magnus, serve as examples of how Norse education works in practice. Leif, at 12, is learning the basics of leadership, trade, and warfare that he'll need as an adult male. But he's learning these skills from you and the other women, not from male warriors. A good leader knows how to count. You tell him as you work together on calculating food stores. Your father is respected as a warrior, but he depends on accurate numbers to know whether the settlement can survive winter. Leif nods seriously, understanding that mathematics isn't just abstract knowledge, but a survival skill. You're teaching him to calculate consumption rates, evaluate trade values, and assess resource requirements. Skills that are just as important for a successful jarl as prowess with sword and axe. Thora's education focuses on the complex skills required for household management, but it's far more comprehensive than outsiders might expect. She's learning textile production, food preparation, animal husbandry, and basic medical care, but she's also learning negotiation, legal principles, and the diplomatic skills required for managing relationships with other settlements. When you're older, you explain as you teach her tablet weaving techniques. You might be responsible for managing trade relationships worth more silver than most warriors see in their entire lives. These skills are just as important as what the boys learn about fighting. Even little Magnus at 4 is beginning to absorb the lessons about cooperation, responsibility, and resourcefulness that characterize successful Viking communities. He helps with simple tasks like collecting eggs and feeding chickens. But he's also learning to pay attention to details, follow instructions precisely, and understand that everyone in the settlement depends on everyone else. The other children in the settlement receive similar education from their mothers and the other women. The thrall children, despite their lower status, are taught useful skills that will increase their value and potentially lead to eventual freedom. The free children learn not just practical skills, but also the stories, laws, and cultural traditions that bind Norse society together. Most importantly, all the children are learning that competent leadership can come from women as well as men. That survival depends on cooperation rather than individual heroism, and that the complex work of managing communities requires intelligence, creativity, and diplomatic skill. As the leaves turn golden and the first snow dusts the mountains, your thoughts turn to the massive preparations required for winter survival. In the harsh climate of western Norway, inadequate preparation means death, and the responsibility for ensuring everyone's survival rests entirely on your shoulders. The work is overwhelming in its scope and complexity. Food stores must be calculated precisely. Too little, and people starve. Too much stored in the wrong way, and spoilage could create shortages later. Buildings must be weatherproofed against storms that can last for weeks. Fuel supplies must be gathered and stored where they'll remain dry but accessible. We need more. Firewood, reports Inga after surveying the woodshed. At least another month's cutting if we want to be comfortable through the worst weather. Wood gathering presents serious logistical challenges with reduced manpower. The remaining men and older boys can handle the heaviest cutting. But much of the work falls to women and children who must work efficiently to avoid exhaustion and injury. You organize cutting parties that work systematically through the forest, taking only what's needed and ensuring that future growth isn't damaged. The wood must be cut to appropriate sizes, seasoned properly, and stored in locations that protect it from moisture while allowing air circulation. But fuel is just one aspect of winter preparation. Food preservation requires constant attention as the last vegetables are harvested and processed. Root vegetables must be stored in root cellars with precise temperature and humidity control. Meat must be smoked, salted, or dried using techniques that have been refined over generations. The textile work intensifies as everyone prepares warm clothing for the brutal months ahead. Wool must be processed into warm garments. Leather must be prepared for weather-resistant outer clothing. And repairs must be made to existing items that will need to last through spring. The children have all outgrown their winter clothes. Helga observes during one of your planning sessions. We'll need to completely re-outfit most of them. Clothing production is time-consuming and resource-intensive, but it's also an opportunity to demonstrate the sophisticated textile skills that make Norse goods valuable throughout Europe. The garments you create aren't just functional, they're beautiful, incorporating complex patterns and decorative elements that reflect cultural traditions and individual creativity. As winter settles over the fjord and travel becomes difficult or impossible, the settlement enters a period of isolation that tests psychological resilience as much as physical resources. The short days and long nights create an atmosphere of introspection that can either bring communities together or tear them apart. You establish routines designed to maintain morale and social cohesion during the months when external contacts are minimal. Evening gatherings in the longhouse become crucial for sharing stories, planning future activities, and reinforcing the bonds that hold the community together. Tell us about the time Father fought the berserkers. Little Magnus requests during one evening storytelling session. It's a story he's heard dozens of times, but repetition serves important psychological functions during the isolation of winter. The stories you tell serve multiple purposes. They preserve cultural traditions and family histories that might otherwise be lost. They provide entertainment during long, dark evenings when other activities are limited. Most importantly, they reinforce shared values and remind everyone of their connections to the broader Norse world. But storytelling is just one aspect of winter community life. You organize competitions in various skills: textile work, wood carving, memory games, and physical challenges that can be conducted indoors. These activities provide goals and achievements that help people maintain purpose during months of relative confinement. The psychological challenges are real and serious. Some members of the community struggle with the isolation, the responsibility, and the uncertainty about what's happening to loved ones who are far away. You find yourself serving as counselor, mediator, and source of encouragement for people who are testing the limits of their emotional resilience. What if they don't come back? Ask Sigrid during a private conversation. It's the fear that haunts every woman during the raiding season, but it becomes more acute during winter when communication is impossible and imagination fills the vacuum with worry. They'll come back. You respond with more confidence than you feel. Our men are skilled warriors and experienced navigators. They know how to survive dangerous situations. But privately, you share the same fears: winter storms, foreign enemies, disease. And simple accidents could prevent the raiders from returning. If spring comes without their return, the settlements will face survival challenges that might be insurmountable. The deepest part of winter brings a crisis that tests every skill you've developed as a leader. A severe storm damages part of the longhouse roof, creating a leak that threatens to destroy food stores and make part of the building uninhabitable during the coldest part of the year. The damage occurs during a blizzard that makes outdoor work dangerous but necessary. Snow and wind pour through the damaged section, creating conditions that could lead to structural collapse if not addressed immediately. We need to get people organized for emergency repairs. You tell Helga as you assess the damage, but we'll have to work in teams to avoid anyone getting lost or injured in this weather. The repair work requires careful coordination under extremely difficult conditions. Work teams must rotate frequently to prevent exhaustion and frostbite. Materials must be gathered from storage areas and moved to the worksite without anyone becoming separated from the group in the blinding snow. Most challenging, the repairs require physical strength and technical skills that are typically associated with male work. But with no men available, you and the other women must figure out how to handle heavy timber and complex construction techniques while managing the safety of everyone involved. I've watched my husband do roof repairs many times, offers Sigrid. I think I understand the basic techniques. The work that follows demonstrates the adaptability and competence that Viking women developed through lifetimes of managing complex challenges. Working together, you successfully complete temporary repairs that will hold until spring, when more permanent work can be done. But the storm damage also reveals vulnerabilities that could become critical if similar problems arise later in winter. Food stores have been moved to different locations, disrupting carefully planned rationing systems. Living spaces have been rearranged, creating new social tensions as families adapt to changed circumstances. The successful management of this crisis establishes your leadership credibility in ways that normal seasonal responsibilities never could. Everyone in the settlement has witnessed your ability to make crucial decisions under pressure, organize effective responses to emergencies, and maintain community stability during dangerous situations. The deepest part of winter, when daylight lasts only a few hours and temperatures remain below freezing for weeks at a time, brings psychological challenges that can be as dangerous as physical threats. The isolation, darkness, and uncertainty create conditions where depression, anxiety, and social conflicts can spiral out of control. You recognize the symptoms early when several community members begin showing signs of what Norse culture calls winter sickness, the melancholy and despair that can grip people during the darkest months. Left untreated, these psychological problems can destroy social cohesion and threaten community survival. Orm hasn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. Helga reports about one of the thralls. He just sits by the fire staring at nothing. The challenge of maintaining mental health during winter requires understanding both individual psychology and group dynamics. People need purpose, social connection, and hope for the future. They need activities that provide a sense of accomplishment and reasons to believe that current hardships are temporary. Your response involves multiple strategies developed through generations of winter survival. Increased social activities bring people together and prevent isolation. Meaningful work. Projects provide purpose and accomplishment. Storytelling and music create emotional connections that counteract despair. Most importantly, you maintain optimism and confidence that serves as an emotional anchor for the entire community. When people see their leader remaining strong and hopeful, they're more likely to maintain their own resilience during difficult periods. Spring will come. You remind everyone during community gatherings. The men will return with silver and stories of their adventures. We'll celebrate their success and plan new expeditions. But for now, we endure winter together, supporting each other until better times arrive. The activities you organize serve both practical and psychological purposes. Textile work continues, creating beautiful goods that will be valuable when trading resumes. Tool maintenance and repair provides useful work while preparing for spring activities. Games and competitions create entertainment and social bonding. But perhaps most importantly, you maintain the ceremonies and traditions that connect the settlement to the broader Norse cultural world. Midwinter celebrations honor the gods and mark the turning point when days begin to lengthen again. These rituals provide hope and meaning that help people endure the darkest period of the year. As the days begin to lengthen and the first signs of spring appear, your attention turns to planning for the activities that will begin once winter releases its grip on the fjord. The men's return is still months away, but preparation for summer activities must begin while winter weather still makes outdoor work difficult. The planning is extraordinarily complex because it must coordinate multiple activities that will all begin simultaneously when weather permits. Fields must be prepared for planting, buildings must be repaired from winter damage, and trade relationships must be renewed after months of isolation. We'll need to clear the lower field before planting. You discuss with Inga during one planning session. The winter flooding left debris that will interfere with cultivation. Agricultural planning requires careful timing and resource allocation. Seeds must be prepared and stored properly. Tools must be repaired and sharpened. Most importantly, work schedules must be coordinated so that essential tasks are completed in the correct sequence. But agriculture is just one aspect of spring. Preparation. Building maintenance requires substantial work after months of harsh weather. Roofs need repair, walls need reinforcement, and various structures need replacement or upgrading. The social aspects of spring planning are equally important. Relationships with other settlements must be renewed after months of limited contact. Trade agreements need updating based on changed circumstances. Diplomatic protocols must be established. For dealing with political developments that might have occurred during winter isolation. Most significantly, you must prepare for the transition back to male leadership when the raiders return. The authorities you've exercised during their absence must be transferred back, gracefully while preserving the relationships and agreements you've established. When Bjorn returns, you discuss with the other women. We need to make sure he understands the decisions we've made and the commitments we've accepted. He'll need to honor our agreements or risk damaging the settlement's reputation. The transition planning requires delicate balance between respecting traditional authority structures and ensuring that effective policies continue. You've proven your competence as a leader, but Norse society still expects ultimate authority to rest with male household heads. Late in the winter, a messenger arrives with the first news from the raiding expedition since the men departed nearly 8 months ago. The young man, nearly frozen from his journey, brings word that fundamentally changes your understanding of the situation you've been managing. The expedition has been more successful than anyone expected. He reports after recovering enough to speak clearly. Your husband and his men have captured substantial silver and are wintering in Ireland, preparing for additional raids in spring. The news is both wonderful and problematic. The raiders' success means prosperity for the settlement and validation of the strategies that led to their expedition. But their decision to winter abroad means they won't return until the following autumn, extending your period of authority for another full year. They're staying in Ireland? You ask, making sure you understand correctly. The Irish king they've been raiding wants to negotiate tribute payments. The messenger explains, Bjorn and the other leaders believe they can secure ongoing payments without fighting if they maintain a presence through winter and spring. The strategic implications are significant. Rather than returning home with a single season's plunder, the raiders are positioning themselves for long-term wealth extraction that could transform the settlement's economic position. But this extended absence creates new challenges for managing the home front. What about supplies? Asks Helga. Do they have adequate provisions for wintering abroad? The messenger nods. They've captured enough food and have established good relationships with Irish merchants who are willing to trade. But they're requesting that additional supplies be sent when sailing resumes in spring. The request creates complex logistical challenges. Sending supplies to Ireland requires organizing a separate expedition, which would further reduce the settlement's available manpower and resources. But supporting the raiders' extended campaign could result in long-term benefits that justify the investment. More personally, the news means that your children will spend another year growing up primarily under your authority rather than their fathers. Your role as settlement leader will continue, extending your influence and responsibility far beyond what anyone originally anticipated. We need to send word to the other settlements, you decide. They'll want to know about their men's success and will need to coordinate any supply expeditions that might be organized. The messenger's news transforms your temporary authority into something approaching permanent leadership. With the men committed to an extended campaign in Ireland, you must plan not just for survival, but for the long-term development of the settlement under female direction. The psychological adjustment is significant for everyone involved. Children who expected to be reunited with their fathers must accept another year of separation. Women who were managing temporary responsibilities must adapt to extended autonomy. The entire community must recalibrate expectations about gender roles and authority structures. This changes everything, observed Sigrid during a leadership council meeting. We're not just maintaining the settlement anymore. We're actively developing it according to our own plans and priorities. The extended timeline allows for projects that wouldn't have been possible during a single season of male absence. Building improvements that require substantial time and resources become feasible. Trade relationships can be developed more thoroughly. Social and economic innovations can be tested and refined. You decide to pursue several ambitious projects that will demonstrate the settlement's prosperity and sophistication. A new longhouse will be constructed to accommodate the expanded population. That successful raiding attracts. The textile production facilities will be upgraded to handle larger volumes of high-quality goods. Most significantly, you'll establish formal trading relationships that bypass traditional male-dominated networks. We have the opportunity to show what we can accomplish. You tell the assembled women, when the men return, they should find a settlement that's more prosperous and better organized than when they left. The construction projects require sophisticated planning and resource management. Building a longhouse involves quarrying stone, cutting timber, and organizing work teams that can handle complex tasks over extended periods. The work must be coordinated with agricultural activities, trade expeditions, and the ongoing maintenance that keeps the settlement functioning. But the most significant project is developing your reputation as an independent trading partner. Word of your competence has spread through the networks of merchants and diplomats who move between settlements. Several trading opportunities have emerged that specifically request to deal with you rather than waiting for male authority figures to return. The Frisian merchants want to establish a regular route that includes Nordfjord, reports one of your contacts. They're impressed by the quality of goods you've been producing and the reliability of your business practices. As spring arrives and sailing becomes possible again, you face the complex decision about whether to send supplies and reinforcements to support the raiders. Extended campaign in Ireland. The decision involves substantial risks and potential rewards that could affect the settlement's future for years to come. The logistics are daunting. A supply expedition would require a ship, experienced sailors, navigational equipment, and sufficient goods to make the journey worthwhile. Most challenging, it would require men who could serve as crew members, a resource the settlement can barely spare. We could manage with a small crew, suggests Leif, your 12-year-old son who's been studying navigation and seamanship. I know the routes from listening to father's stories, and some of the older thralls have sailing experience. The idea of sending your own son on a dangerous sea voyage to a foreign land is terrifying, but it also represents the kind of opportunity that creates successful Viking leaders. Norse society expects young men to prove themselves through dangerous expeditions, and waiting until his father returns might mean missing crucial development opportunities. What about the cargo? Asks Helga. What do they most need, and what can we afford to send? The supplies list is extensive. The raiders need weapons, tools, medical supplies, and luxury goods that can be used for trade or tribute payments. They also want specific items from home, certain foods, textiles, and personal belongings that maintain connections to their families and settlement. Most importantly, they're requesting skilled craftsmen who can help establish more permanent facilities for an extended presence in Ireland. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and textile workers could help the raiders create the infrastructure needed for long-term operations. The decision you reach involves compromise and calculated risk-taking. You'll organize a supply expedition, but with careful attention to maintaining adequate resources for the settlement's continued operation. Leif will participate, but under the supervision of experienced adults who can ensure his safety and education. This expedition will demonstrate our settlement's strength and competence. You announce to the community. When it succeeds, everyone will know that Nordfjord can support complex operations even when our primary warriors are absent. The second year of your extended leadership brings opportunities to develop diplomatic relationships that wouldn't have been possible under traditional male authority. Several foreign visitors specifically request to meet with you, curious about the Norse settlement that's being managed so successfully by women. The most significant visit comes from a delegation of Frankish merchants who are exploring trade opportunities in Scandinavia. Their leader, a sophisticated businessman named Guillaume, arrives with goods and proposals that could substantially expand the settlement's economic reach. We've heard remarkable reports about this settlement, Guillaume explains during the formal reception you've arranged. Our contacts throughout the region speak of innovative trade practices and exceptional craftsmanship that maintains high standards even during challenging circumstances. The Frankish interest represents both opportunity and complexity. Trade with the Frankish Empire could provide access to luxury goods, sophisticated technologies, and silver that supplements traditional raiding income, but it also requires navigating the political tensions between Christian Franks and pagan Norse communities. What specific goods interest your merchants? You ask, beginning the careful negotiation process. Amber, furs, iron goods, and textiles. Guillaume responds, particularly the tablet-woven pieces that demonstrate such exceptional skill. Christian monasteries and noble households pay premium prices for high-quality northern textiles. The irony is significant. While your husband raids Christian lands for silver, you're developing peaceful trade relationships with Christian merchants who eagerly purchase Norse goods. The arrangement benefits everyone involved while demonstrating that Viking communities can engage with the outside world through commerce as well as warfare. But the diplomatic aspects are even more important than the economic ones. Your success in negotiating with foreign visitors establishes precedents for how Norse women can exercise authority in international relationships. The agreements you reach will be honored by your husband when he returns, creating expectations about female competence in diplomatic matters. You negotiate with wisdom and skill. Guillaume acknowledges as the discussions conclude. Our merchants look forward to long-term relationships with this settlement. The extended period of female leadership creates opportunities to experiment with social arrangements that challenge traditional Norse customs while remaining within acceptable cultural boundaries. Some of these innovations prove so successful that they continue even after male authority is restored. One significant change involves the education of children, particularly girls, who receive more comprehensive training in leadership skills than would normally be available. Your own daughter, Thora, now 10, has been exposed to diplomatic negotiations, legal proceedings, and complex business decisions that few Norse girls experience. "I want to learn tablet weaving like you," Thora tells you during one of your work sessions. "But I also want to understand how to negotiate with foreign traders like the Frankish merchants." The education you provide combines traditional female skills with traditionally male knowledge, creating a generation of young women who will be better prepared to exercise authority when circumstances require it. The other mothers in the settlement follow your example, recognizing that versatile skills provide advantages in an uncertain world. The thrall community also benefits from the social innovations that emerged during this period. With fewer free men available to supervise thrall work, you've developed management systems that rely more on incentives and cooperation than on coercion and punishment. Good work should be rewarded. You explain to the other women, thralls who contribute effectively to community welfare deserve recognition and the possibility of eventual freedom. Several thralls have been allowed to accumulate personal property and develop specialized skills that increase their value and improve their living conditions. This approach proves more effective than traditional harsh supervision, producing better work quality and fewer behavioral problems. The most innovative social experiment involves the legal system. With traditional male authorities absent, you've developed procedures for resolving disputes that emphasize mediation and community consensus rather than authoritarian judgment. These approaches prove effective for maintaining order while preserving social relationships. People are more likely to accept decisions they've participated in making. You observe during discussions with the other women, including everyone in the process, creates better solutions and stronger community support. The second year of your leadership sees the settlement's economic activities expand far beyond what anyone thought possible under female direction. Trade relationships proliferate, craft production increases, and innovative business practices generate prosperity that rivals what successful raiding expeditions typically produce. The textile production, in particular, reaches levels that establish Norfjord as a regional center for high-quality goods. Your tablet weaving has gained recognition throughout Scandinavia, with orders coming from as far away as Denmark and Sweden. The other women have developed complementary specializations that create a comprehensive production system. We're producing more wealth than many raiding expeditions, Helga observes as you calculate the season's trading profits. And we're doing it without the risks of warfare or long-distance travel. The economic success creates new challenges and opportunities. Increased production requires more raw materials, larger storage facilities, and expanded trading networks to market the goods effectively. Success also attracts attention from other settlements that want to understand how Nordfjord has achieved such prosperity. Most importantly, the economic expansion demonstrates that Viking settlements can thrive through peaceful production as well as aggressive raiding. While the cultural emphasis remains on martial prowess and external conquest, the practical reality is that successful communities require sophisticated economic management. Your innovations in business practices are being studied and copied by other settlements. The integrated approach to craft production, the systematic development of trade relationships, and the emphasis on quality over quantity have proven effective enough to influence regional economic patterns. Traders specifically request goods from Nordfjord, reports one of your business contacts. They know that anything produced here will meet high standards and be delivered as promised. The reputation for reliability and quality becomes a valuable asset that generates ongoing business relationships. Unlike raiding wealth, which is acquired once and then spent, trade reputation creates sustainable income streams that can support the settlement indefinitely. As the second autumn approaches, and the possibility of the men's return becomes more likely, you begin the complex process of preparing to transfer authority back to traditional male leadership while preserving the innovations and relationships you've developed. The transition planning requires delicate balance between respecting cultural expectations and maintaining effective policies. You've proven that women can successfully manage complex settlements, but Norse society still expects ultimate authority to rest with male household heads when they're available. Bjorn will need to understand everything we've accomplished. You discuss with the other women. If he dismisses our innovations as temporary expedients, he could damage relationships that took years to develop. The documentation you prepare is comprehensive, detailing every agreement, innovation, and relationship that's been developed during the extended period of female leadership. Trade contracts, diplomatic arrangements, and social policies are all recorded carefully to ensure continuity regardless of leadership changes. But the most important preparation involves the psychological adjustment required for both the returning men and the women who've been exercising authority. Both groups will need to adapt to changed circumstances while maintaining the relationships and achievements that have made the settlement prosperous. Your children, particularly, will need help adjusting to their father's return after 2 years of primary maternal authority. Leif has developed leadership skills and confidence that might not fit easily with traditional expectations about youthful deference to adult male authority. I've learned so much while father was away, Leif confides, during one of your conversations. I hope he'll be proud of what I've accomplished, but I also hope he'll let me continue developing my skills. The successful management of this transition will determine whether the innovations of the past 2 years become permanent improvements or temporary departures from normal practice. Your goal is to ensure that the settlement emerges from this period stronger and more prosperous than when it began. On a crisp autumn morning in 849 AD, 2 years after their departure, the longships finally reappear on the horizon. The dragon-headed prows that disappeared into morning mist now emerge from afternoon sunlight, carrying the men whose absence has transformed everything about how the settlement operates. The emotion of reunion is overwhelming, but it's complicated by the reality that both the returning men and the women who've been managing in their absence have changed significantly during the long separation. The settlement they're returning to is more prosperous, better organized, and operates according to systems they didn't create and don't fully understand. Bjorn's reaction to the changes is a mixture of pride, surprise, and subtle concern about how his authority will fit into the systems you've established. The Longhouse has been expanded, new trade relationships have been developed, and social practices have evolved in ways that might not conform to his expectations. You've accomplished far more than I thought possible, he admits as you show him through the expanded facilities and explain the innovations that have been implemented. But some of these changes will require careful consideration before they become permanent. The reunion with your children is equally complex. Leif has grown from a boy into a young man with skills and confidence that his father doesn't immediately recognize. Thora has developed abilities that exceed traditional expectations for girls her age. Even Magnus has changed from a small child into someone with established routines and relationships. Father, Leif says carefully, I learned navigation and trading while you were away. I led a supply expedition to Ireland and negotiated successfully with foreign merchants. Bjorn's response reveals the tension between pride in his son's accomplishments and concern about authority structures that he wasn't present to oversee. Traditional Norse culture values young men who show initiative, but it also emphasizes respect for established hierarchies. The other returning men face similar adjustments as they discover how much their wives and children have changed during the extended absence. Houses have been modified, business relationships have been developed, and social arrangements have evolved according to female judgment rather than male direction. Most significantly, the women themselves have changed. 2 years of exercising independent authority has created confidence and competence that won't easily return to traditional patterns of deference and dependence. The weeks following the men's return involve careful negotiation between traditional authority structures and the innovations that have proven successful during their absence. Both sides recognize that simply returning to pre-departure arrangements would waste valuable improvements, but adapting to change requires flexibility from everyone involved. Bjorn's approach to this challenge demonstrates both wisdom and pragmatism, rather than immediately reasserting traditional male authority over all activities. It takes time to understand the systems you've developed and evaluate their effectiveness. The trade agreements you negotiated are excellent. He acknowledges after reviewing the documentation you've prepared. I couldn't have achieved better. Terms in some of these relationships wouldn't have been available to male negotiators. The recognition of your competence creates opportunities to establish new patterns of shared authority that build on traditional structures while incorporating innovations. You retain responsibility for areas where you've demonstrated particular expertise, while Bjorn reassumes authority over military matters and external diplomatic relationships. The other couples in the settlement work through similar adjustments. With varying degrees of success, some men are comfortable with the competence their wives have developed, while others struggle with changes that challenge their sense of appropriate gender roles. Gunnar wants Helga to stop the trading relationship she's developed. You learn during a conversation with the other women. He says it's not appropriate for women to conduct business with foreign merchants. These tensions create challenges that affect the entire community. Successful settlement management requires cooperation between all the families. But disagreements about authority and responsibility can undermine the relationships that make cooperation possible. Your response to these challenges helps establish precedents that will influence how other Norse settlements handle similar situations. The solutions you develop balance respect for cultural traditions with recognition that effective governance requires utilizing everyone's talents and skills. We've proven that women can manage complex responsibilities successfully, you argue, during community discussions. The question now is whether we'll continue using those skills or pretend that the past 2 years never happened. 5 years after the men's return, the innovations developed during your period of extended leadership have become integral parts of how Nordfjord operates. The successful integration of female authority into traditional male-dominated structures has created a more resilient and prosperous settlement that serves as a model for other communities. The economic benefits are undeniable. Trade relationships that you developed continue to generate substantial income. Craft production systems that you organized maintain high quality and reliability. Most importantly, the settlement has demonstrated that prosperity can be achieved through peaceful economic activity as well as successful raiding. Your personal relationship with Bjorn has evolved into a partnership that utilizes both of your strengths while respecting cultural expectations about male authority. He handles military matters, external diplomacy, and ceremonial functions, while you manage trade relationships, economic planning, and many aspects of internal governance. We work well together, Bjorn observes during one of your planning sessions. Your skills complement mine in ways that make us more effective than either of us would be working independently. The children have also benefited from the extended period of maternal authority. Leif has developed into a young man with exceptional skills in both traditional male activities and economic management. Thora has received education that will make her an extraordinarily capable wife and household manager. Magnus has grown up assuming that competent authority can be exercised by women as well as men. Most significantly, the reputation of your settlement has spread throughout Scandinavia as an example of how Norwegian communities can adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining cultural traditions. Visitors come specifically to observe how Nordfjord operates and to learn from the innovations that have proven successful. Other settlements are copying our methods. Helga reports after a visit from a delegation of women leaders from Denmark. They want to understand how we managed to maintain prosperity during such challenging circumstances. The legacy of yore. Leadership extends beyond immediate practical benefits to influence broader attitudes about women's capabilities and appropriate roles in Norse society. While traditional cultural patterns remain dominant, the precedent of successful female leadership creates possibilities that didn't exist before your demonstration of competence. Looking back on the experience, you recognize that the necessity of managing the settlement during the men's extended absence created opportunities to develop and demonstrate capabilities that might otherwise have remained hidden. The crisis that seemed overwhelming when it began ultimately became the foundation for innovations that strengthened the entire community. The sound that once represented your greatest challenge, the silence of an empty settlement after the men's departure, has become the sound of accomplishment. In that silence, you discovered strength, competence, and leadership abilities that transformed not just your own life, but the entire character of your community. The Viking women who managed households while men were away weren't just maintaining the status quo until traditional authority returned. They were actively developing their communities, creating innovations, and demonstrating that effective leadership could come from unexpected sources when circumstances required it. Your story, and the stories of countless other Norse women who faced similar challenges, represents a crucial but often overlooked aspect of Viking society. Behind the dramatic tales of raiding and conquest was the equally important reality of intelligent, capable women who ensured that there were prosperous settlements for the warriors to return to. The keys that Bourne placed in your hands at the beginning of his departure represented more than temporary authority. They represented trust in your ability to protect and develop everything that both of you valued. The successful fulfillment of that trust created a legacy that influenced not just your own family, but the broader patterns of how Viking communities understood the relationship between gender, authority, and competence. In the quiet moments of evening, as you sit in the expanded longhouse, surrounded by the prosperity that emerged from years of careful management, you remember the morning when you first discovered that real power wasn't about wielding weapons or commanding raiding expeditions. Real power was about ensuring that communities survived, thrived, and grew stronger regardless of what challenges they faced. The Viking Age was shaped by many kinds of courage. The courage to cross dangerous seas, the courage to face armed enemies, and the courage to explore unknown lands. But it was also shaped by the courage to accept responsibility for other people's welfare, to make difficult decisions without guidance, and to prove that leadership could emerge from anyone who was willing to serve their community's needs. That courage, displayed by women throughout the Viking world who managed households while men were away, represents one of the most important but least celebrated aspects of Norse civilization. Their success made possible the achievements that history remembers, and their legacy continues to influence how we understand the relationship between gender, power, and effective leadership. The silence that greeted you on that first morning after the men's departure was not empty space waiting to be filled. It was opportunity waiting to be grasped by anyone bold enough to step forward and take responsibility for shaping the future. In that silence, Viking women discovered that they possessed everything necessary to build, lead, and innovate. Everything. Except the recognition that their accomplishments deserved. Now, as the firelight flickers against the walls of the longhouse you expanded, the textile tools you improved, and the trade goods that represent relationships you developed, that recognition finally comes. Not from the broader world that focuses on warriors and battles, but from the understanding that real historical significance lies in the courage to protect and develop what matters most when everything depends on your judgment. Your skills and your determination to ensure that your community not only survives, but prospers. This is how Viking society really worked. Not just through the dramatic exploits that capture historical attention, but through the daily competence of people who understood that civilization depends on someone being willing to tend the fires, manage the resources, maintain the relationships, and preserve the values that make life worth living. The legacy of that understanding echoes through history, reminding us that leadership comes in many forms and that the most important contributions to human civilization often happen in quiet moments when ordinary people choose to accept extraordinary responsibility for their community's welfare. The story of how Viking women ran households while men were away is ultimately the story of how real communities actually function through the cooperation, competence, and courage of everyone who chooses to contribute their skills to the collective enterprise of building something better than what they inherited. And in that story, the silence of empty settlements becomes the sound of opportunity. The absence of traditional authority becomes the space for innovation. And the challenge of unprecedented responsibility becomes the foundation for achievements that transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations.